Hi there. I'm Jan Polish, and I've been teaching origami for over 30 years, and I learned from our founders, Michael, Lillian, and Alice. And I think I'm a reasonably good teacher. And but I want you to first be aware that we have some aids on our website. There's a teaching tips website. There's also a uh, something on the website about origami classroom etiquette, which is good for you to read because it tells you what to expect from your students. And we want to encourage people to look at that page too. Okay, so now you've decided you do want to teach. What do you want to teach? Well, the first and most important thing is pick something you like. I think a good teaching is a combination of skill, knowledge, and enthusiasm. So, doing something you really enjoy folding and love the results of is the best way to build enthusiasm in your class. Over the years, you've probably seen other teachers. You learn something from good teachers, and you should seek them out whenever you can. But I think sometimes you learn even more from bad teachers. If you're in a class and the teacher is not being precise or not showing the whole room or doing anything that makes it difficult for you to complete your model, then you've learned some things when you want to teach. So I urge you to get a combination of good teachers and bad teachers under your belt. So you've picked your model. You really love this model and you're getting ready to teach it. So the first thing you have to do is really, really learn that model. Know it backwards and forwards. And notice what parts of the procedure are a little difficult even for you. Verbalize everything you're doing. Diagrams are one way to verbalize, if you will, the steps of a model. But when you're in front of a classroom, that doesn't work because in the diagrams, they can put two dots and alphabetical letters and say, fold from point A to point B. You can't do that in a class. You have to have landmarks. You have to be able to say, fold from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner. If you hear yourself saying things from like from here to there, try to come up with a better way to explain that because from here to there tends not to work well in a class. So, and come up with landmarks. Sometimes there are landmarks that are not so precise, what some people call the RAT folds, the right about there. But try to be able to explain it. If the fold starts somewhere on the left side and it's about at the halfway point, but not all the way on the halfway point, try to explain it's 3/4 to the halfway point or it's a third to the halfway point. Um, you're going to have a large piece of paper, have a marker, show on your marker what point you mean, and explain why. For example, if you're teaching the swan, you're teaching them how to put the head in. You want to explain that if you fold to a certain point, the head's going to be big and long. If you fold to another point, it's going to be short and stubby. And they may prefer it one way or another, and you're not going to necessarily dictate it. But sometimes there's some people who are really not comfortable with vague folds, and then you might want to say, well, I personally like to have it folded this way. And you show them exactly where your landmark is. And practice, practice, practice folding the model. And try teaching it to anybody you can find. If it's a simple model or low intermediate model, find people who don't have a lot of experience with origami and try to teach it to them. If once they can learn it well, then you're on your way. But remember that teaching a model to someone who's sitting next to you is very different from teaching it to a class full of 25 people. So when you practice your teaching, try to have your student sitting in a place that's a little bit further from you, and that'll help you understand how to make them see the model. You may not want to, you may realize that they can't see the details. And so that's something you'll have to correct. You also will have to rate the difficulty of the model and also how much time it takes. So fold the model yourself slowly, no races, very slowly, and then triple the time. I mean, it makes sense. Imagine it's like having a translation where you say something in a foreign language and then it's repeated in English. And then you need additional extra time for people who didn't quite get it the first time. So at least 3 times how long it takes you to fold it slowly and carefully. Now you really have to select your paper and consider what you're wearing. I'm wearing black, as I often do. Now, look at what happens when I use black paper against my black shirt. It can tend to disappear. So pick colors that contrast, bright colors. Don't try not to use foil unless it's absolutely necessary for the model, because it's very difficult to see the creases in foil. And don't ever use white. White is lovely for things like swans. However, when you say to your student, color side up, what do you mean? So even if you are doing something that would look fantastic in white, try not to teach with it or have your students use it. Also, don't use prints. You can't see this very well, but it's a very busy print. And when I fold it, it's very hard. Well, it's easy with the shadows, but in a normal class, it's very hard to see the crease. It's easier. See, the camera makes it just the reverse. It's easier on the white side. So, and you want to be folding paper that's larger than what your students are folding, but not so large to be unwieldy. Unless you're folding a complex model where you have to start with 12-inch paper or even larger, you shouldn't teach with larger than even 10-inch paper can be floppy. The ideal teaching is with a 6-inch piece of paper, as long as it's an intermediate and simpler model. But you have to use your judgment. Now, another thing to remember is don't use a pre-folded piece of paper that you've then taken apart. Because then when you point to a crease, they can't tell which crease you're actually pointing to. The If the paper has lots of creases on it, it's going to be difficult to identify. Uh, as it is, you might want to have a marker with you to highlight a crease you're talking about if there are already multiple creases on the paper. Maybe even 2 colors of markers, one to show valley folds and one to show mountain folds. But and you may want to fold step folds in advance that you can then, for the earliest steps, then you could then paste on the wall so that if somebody comes in a little late for your class, they can actually get started by themselves. You also should have your sample models with you. You can remove your model from the model menu before the class starts, or you can bring additional models from home. And that points out another thing. Even if your model looks gorgeous in a certain paper, I would say don't teach it in class. Now, my cat finds that fascinating, and I apologize for his attendance. Um, the My first model is always not the best, and it is. Come on, it is. So I tend to want to fold in plain kami, and then what I'll do if there is gorgeous paper is I'll hand it out at the end of the class and say, now you can make one on your own using the beautiful paper. I also tend to start out, if it's a small modular, I will teach the module first in 6-inch paper so that they can take it home and unfold it and fold it to remember the steps, and then let them work with the slightly smaller paper on their own model. So that's always very useful. Um, and um, when you, if you have, if it's multiple colors, I mean, I'm sorry, multiple pieces, if it's a modular, or if there's, it's two-part model, have the papers already collated for them. If you have a full class, and even if it's only one model, if it's a full class, passing paper around takes long time. If it's slightly special paper that you've provided for the class, what I tend to do is just put it in the front of the class and let people just come up and take their paper or take the pack of paper that they would like to use. Because passing around with, oh, I want that shade of blue, I want that shade of green, please, I hate yellow, it takes forever. And it's taking time from the careful calculation you made in how long it would take to teach your model. So, okay, so you've got everything set up. The class is about to start. And so the first thing you'll do is you will announce yourself, introduce the model. If you don't have permission to circulate the diagrams, tell them where they can find the diagrams, who created it, who introduced it to you, any interesting stories you have about the model. And if it's a modular, actually, I tend to save the stories for when they're folding the other 8 versions of it. Do save some stories. It's always good to fill the silence. And also, if the class has some slightly difficult moves that make it at the top end of the skill set, let's say it's on the high end of low intermediate and it has a sink that you can probably explain pretty well, but if it's somebody who's never folded anything but very simple models, they might have difficulty. Then I actually try to scare the students a little bit. I'll say to them that this class includes a sink. If you're not comfortable doing sinks, there's still plenty of time for you to go get another class. You really want people in the class who are up to the skill level that you anticipate. Because if you have people who are very behind the rest of the class, then it's going to delay you and it's going to delay the rest of the class. So all right, so you're in front of the class. Make sure everyone can see you as much as possible. If it's a large class, not everybody's going to see your slightest motions because and that makes it really important for you to be aware of the entire classroom. Don't just teach to the people you can see right in front of you, because then it means probably the people on the periphery of the class can't see you. So you have to, I tend to teach every move 3 times. First to the people in front of me, then to the left of the room, and then to the right of the room. And then and you watch people's faces, not just their hands, but their faces. You can spot people who are very confused and people who are doing just fine. And then one of the tricks Michael Schall always did, he would say, "Show me what I'm showing you," and pick up his model, show it to the class, and ask everyone to show him their version. It's much better to catch someone who's having trouble in the early stages rather than when they've gone 3 or 4 steps more and have really made it difficult to unravel. You also want to, he used to say, it's not cheating to look at your classmates' paper. So encourage people to help each other, but not to the point that it's going to delay everyone. And if one of the things to say is, if you're having a problem, don't check necessarily with your neighbor. raise your hand and ask me, because if you're having a problem, it might mean that there are other people having the same problem. So, and my cat is sitting on my notes, which is worse than sitting on my lap. Um, and if you think you have a full class, check their ticket list to make sure that you don't have guardians sitting in, that you don't have people who didn't sign up for the class sitting in. Because not only does that make it difficult for you, especially if you have special paper, but it makes it difficult for the rest of the class. If you have a full class and there's a guardian trying to sit next to their child, it's first of all going to annoy other people who actually did sign up for the class, but it's also going to delay everyone. And it means that the child will look to their parent, their guardian, for help instead of at you. And you always want the class to be responding to you most of all. All right, so we've started the class. Oh, yeah, one more thing. If you feel that you need to notate some step that it's easy to see, if you've tried using the marker on the paper you're folding and it's still not clear, there's usually a blackboard, and you could draw some guides on the blackboard. Use every bit you've got in that classroom. Okay, class is ready to start. As I said, you have to make sure you're teaching to the whole room. Be relaxed, be supportive, make jokes, be self-denigrating. I am not a perfect folder, which is great when I'm teaching a class because it gives my students permission to not be perfect folders, because they can be, people can be a little disheartened when they make a fold that's not quite perfect. Well, I use my Boston Red Sox mug. So, and I would say, even if you have permission to hand out the diagrams, don't. Give them out at the end of the class. Now, why, you say? Because some people prefer to work from diagrams, and that's very true. But what's going to happen is you're working, teaching step 3, and the person in the back who's working from the diagram is interrupting you to say, could you explain step 7, please? And that really disrupts the class. Remember, you're working on a time limit, and you have a whole class to satisfy, not just the one person. So hand out the diagrams at the end so people can reproduce it. I also like to hand out, as I said, some special paper that might make the model even more attractive. And if I've had samples, I'll sometimes make sure that the samples use more interesting paper. And as you're teaching, the most important thing is what I call the spelling bee. You know, in a spelling bee, they say it, spell it, say it. And it's the same thing with origami. Before you do a step, you make sure everyone is orienting their paper the same way you are. Show them your paper, have them confirm that that's what they've got. Then make the move and explain it and show it to each side of the room. And then show your result and try to get the class to confirm that they have the same result. Now, at times, you may be folding upside down so that they can see things, or you might move your paper to the desk to make the fold and then unfold it to be able to show them what the maneuver is. But the important thing is that they need to be able to see what you're doing. Some people are fine with the verbal instructions that you practiced back when you were learning the model. And some people are not comfortable with verbal instructions. They need to see the model. They need to see the move being made. And if somebody still has difficulty understanding a step, have them either come up to you and stand next to you, or you get up and stand next to them and repeat it so you're standing next to them and they can see the orientation more clearly. Sometimes it may be necessary to help them, and what you want to try to do is, with permission, take the model, make the move, but then unfold what you did because it needs to be their model, not yours. Now, I know I'm very fussy about that. Once someone else touches my model, it's not mine. I get no satisfaction out of it. And I know other people are the same way. Now, some people don't care. They just want to have the model at the end. But I want to feel that I made that model. And that means all the folds on it are mine. Okay. So as I said, you're watching papers, you're watching the faces, you're having them periodically showing you what you're showing them. You're giving individual help. You're making sure that the class timing is working too. If when you practiced at home, you thought that it might take a little longer than the standard period, you could ask for overflow periods, which means just before lunch or just before the end of the day. So that if you go a little late, you're not interfering with the next class. And if there are some people who are having real difficulty finishing the model, you might offer to meet them later in the cafeteria or in a classroom or wherever, because you don't want to slow down the rest of the class. And that's true in the middle. If you realize that someone is really in over their head, you feel that you must help them. But sometimes you've got to resist because spending too much time helping the one person who's having trouble means that the other 24 or 7 or 16 are not going to be able to finish their model on time. So I feel that it's better to sacrifice a little of my time and help that person later so that the other 24 or 15 or 16 or whatever people can get their model done on time. So that's actually all it takes to teach origami. It's a little different from teaching a regular class of something else, and that's why some people who are superb teachers of English or history are not necessarily the best origami teachers because they haven't learned how to convert those skills into origami. But if you are helpful, supportive, skilled, and love your model, you're going to be a great teacher. Thanks.